Jen.
Hey, Em.
How are you?
I'm doing great this morning. How are you?
I don't know. By the time this episode comes out, it'll be after the election. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
things could be horrible right now.
Yeah, I'm I have to
So
say I'm a
maybe
little
we
scared.
shouldn't, yeah, so maybe we shouldn't say like, oh, we're great because like by chance
That's true.
there
Oh,
could be like a
yeah.
massive
Someone
civil
might
war
be
occurring
right. Someone might be listening.
and be
And
like, wow, what's
yeah,
wrong with these girls? But it's actually
yeah.
because this has been
We're not
pre-recorded.
live. Yeah,
This
this
is
is
not
not a
live. This has been
live
pre-recorded. We
show.
have no idea what has happened after November 5th.
Well,
Um,
our future selves will know.
and this might not be so great.
We'll see. Time will tell.
Here we are though.
Time
But
will tell.
here we go. Um, if everything's horrible, we're sorry. And we
Yeah.
love you. I don't know.
Then we'll record another
We'll come out with
episode.
other content for that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, somebody wrote in, listener Danny. What's something you tried once and instantly knew it wasn't for you?
Aperol.
Ugh. No, listen, I agree. I hate
I
an Aperol spritz.
hate Aperol. I don't understand.
People love it
I've
though,
I keep trying. Whenever someone really likes something and I don't like it, I keep trying it.
because you want to
And I'm
like
like,
it.
because I'm like, I don't understand the hype and like what's going on here. Another thing, this is honestly, I don't know if this is gonna land, but like tuna fish.
Like out of a can or like
Yeah, out of a can, like yeah, or like you get like a sandwich, tuna fish sandwich. Like my, like
Aperol
my,
and tuna fish. Those are your two answers.
yeah, I would say this. Those are my two things,
Right.
especially not together.
Oh God, that would be all. What a horrible
I'm
combination.
so
Someone's gonna write in and be
sorry.
like, "I love that combination."
Right, and I apologize. I don't want to
Don't you?
yuck your
Don't
yum.
yuck their yum.
I am so sorry, but
Yeah,
I'm trying to think. Is that what comes to mind for you?
reality TV.
Listen,
I know
aren't
you
you
want me to like
watching?
it.
Aren't you watching?
The Ghost Whisperer. Only I. Okay, here's what you have to know about me is I love horrible TV, but I don't love horrible TV in like terms of like reality TV. I like a really, really horrible sitcom. So currently, I'm watching the 2004 Ghost Whisperer with Jennifer Love Hewitt. And this came with me also watching The Client List with Jennifer Love Hewitt, who was so big in the early 2000s.
She's 200s. Is she your favorite actress? I'm confused.
She might be. And
Should we get her on the show?
I hate to say this. I don't think she's the world's best actress, but there's
Right.
something
But
about her
apparently you
show.
just keep
I and so I am now on season 4 of The Ghost Whisperer, which is horrible.
let
And
me tell
I love it.
I have never in my life heard of the Ghost Whisperer until you told me about it.
Well,
What network is it on? Lifetime? Is it on Lifetime?
I don't know. I'm watching it on Hulu. It probably was on Lifetime though. Like, I'm like,
Bro,
actually, now that you're saying it, I'm like, oh, it probably was a Lifetime show.
it's
I'm not sure. I'll look it
definitely
up.
a Lifetime show.
It's on Hulu. It's pretty bad, but I'm obsessed. I'm in season 4. It's the final season. So it's a pretty big deal. But no, but so that's what I mean. But for some reason, reality TV, I know everyone wants me to like it. I know people want me to talk about it. It's just not for me,
Not for
man. It feels too
you.
scripted. If it just let it be scripted, then
Right, right. Let it be the Ghost Whisperer.
let it be bad. I don't need
That's
this to be
like,
something it's not.
listen, I hate to say this, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Ted Lasso.
Too too
Too too
too ugly.
bouncy.
Too bouncy. That's like, there was another show I tried to get you to watch this video. You're like also too bouncy. Oh,
Yeah.
Abbott Elementary, which I'm sorry. If you were from
No,
Philadelphia and you don't watch Abbott
I
Elementary, there's something wrong with you.
I do think it's funny. I just like, I like my shit to be dark
Yeah, you're fucked
and
up.
I'm fucked up.
Yeah. Well, maybe you have less intrusive thoughts than me because today's episode is about intrusive thoughts
Or do I have
and
more?
or more. I don't know. Let's find out about it. So let's talk a little bit about intrusive thoughts. Everyone has them. It is okay to have them. People are very freaked out. What's wrong with me? I have these. So first of all, let's just normalize that every person has had some type of intrusive thought at some point, right? Like maybe you don't. Yes.
I have a statistic.
Hit me with it,
In
baby.
a study, 94% of people have experienced intrusive
Yeah.
thought at least once in the last 3 months.
Yes. Okay.
94% in
So
this
like
one study.
you have them. So let's say, so intrusive thoughts are unwanted, often troubling thoughts or images that that pop into your head just out of nowhere. And another key characteristic of intrusive thought is that it doesn't align with who you are and it does not reflect your wants, desires, or mood, which is often what makes it super disturbing. And so we hear them a lot when we talk about women in postpartum. Almost 100% of women in postpartum will have some type of intrusive thoughts. They are often violent and intrusive towards their children, and they're also totally normal. And they often have so much more to do with your fears. They're not actually like you want to do something. That's what people are fears. Their fear is, okay, well, if I have this intrusive thought, it's my subconscious. This is this thing I actually want. That is not true. It's like this thing your body would never want to happen. So it does it, right? Most people have had this experience with like when you have a blender out, right? Put my hand in the blender, my hand in the garbage disposal.
I had that the garbage disposal.
The garbage disposal, right? It's like, what if I just did it? You obviously do not want to do that, but the fear of it makes it intrusive thought. And these are different than rumination. So people often will confuse intrusive thoughts with rumination. So we want to talk a little bit about the difference of these things. And there's a few different things. So one with rumination, so there's a few big differences. Spontaneity is a big one. Intrusive thoughts are involuntary and they enter the mind without warning, while rumination is really not spontaneous, right? So I can ruminate on something embarrassing that happened last week. Something reminds me of it. I keep overthinking about it. That's not the same as like, oh, I get the blender out to make myself a protein shake and like, want to put my hand in.
That's the sound the blender would make.
I don't think that was good. What noise is a blender?
Like
what's yours? Why did it meow? Because the cat was in the blender. Okay. Content. Intrusive thoughts are often distressing and perceived as inappropriate, while rumination usually involves dwelling on negative feelings, past events, or future problems. So one is like hyperfixating on a thought, and one is like this intrusive, a random, like disturbing thought that comes in. Intrusive thoughts are often ego dystonic, or they feel like they're apart from the person, while rumination is often ego syntonic, which feels like it's a part of the person's own mind. So one of them comes externally, it just jumps on into that brain, and the other one feels like it's kind of been there. The purpose of them. Intrusive thoughts are often resisted, while rumination is typically a choice to try and figure out the cause of fears or what to do to prevent something bad. So often when we're ruminating on something or we're overthinking is another way to think about it. We think if we keep thinking about it, that we're going to figure it out. There's going to be a solution here. I'm going to think myself out of the awkwardness. I'm going to think myself out of the guilt. I'm going to think myself out of it. That does not work. It's such a lovely idea. It's a lie that we tell ourselves. And then duration. So intrusive memories or short sensory experience, while rumination is a longer thought process. So those are like the really good ways to sort of identify the difference between rumination and intrusive thoughts.
The thing that I love specifically, the reason why I love that we're talking about this is because I think it is true that so often when we have like a really distressing, intrusive thought, something that would be like, oh, I'm going to hurt my child or I'm going to do something bad, that there's so much shame that can come from those intrusive thoughts because it feels like, oh, this must mean something about me.
Yeah.
Right. This must mean I'm bad that I have this intrusive thought, that something's wrong with me. And so the reason, once again, why I love that we're talking about this is because this is just something that happens when you are a human being.
Yeah. And right. And so here's an example of that. So when I was postpartum, we've talked about this a bunch. I've talked about this in the show before. I had really bad intrusive thoughts that I have like an open staircase in my house that I was going to throw Millie down the stairs, or that I would trip on the stairs and she would fall over the staircase. And I was so sure this was going to happen. It became a big problem in my marriage because my husband would go to work. I'd be at home by myself all day, and I wouldn't let myself walk up and down the stairs with her. And then he would be like, oh, I'm coming home at 5:00. And it'd be like 5:01. And I'd be like calling him screaming because I actually waited all day to walk up the stairs for him to get there because I was so scared to do it. At no point did I ever throw my child off the stairs. Was I ever close to throwing my child off the stairs? Did anything remotely like this ever happen? And it didn't mean I wanted to throw my child off the stairs, but I had a fear that because I kept having this intrusive thought that it meant that like I was going to do it. So then I just didn't let myself go down the stairs. This is how you know. Somebody had said, like, how do you know when intrusive thoughts are really bad and they're not just like this thought that comes in? That's how you know. If it is genuinely affecting your quality of life and relationships, then you need to get help and get support for the intrusive thoughts.
Mm-hmm. And this is where we want to differentiate between just like random intrusive thoughts that happen and then intrusive thoughts that may be part of obsessive compulsive
Yeah.
disorder, where if you have an intrusive thought, you then have a compulsion to try to battle the intrusive thought, right? So if this is something that is affecting your daily life, listening to this podcast isn't something that's going to help you. It may be something that drives you into getting specific help for
Yeah.
it and might be really important to do it. And there's so many things that can trigger intrusive thoughts. Certain trauma, hormonal shifts is a big reason why we can get intrusive thoughts. But they can just happen and it's okay that they happen. And I think the big thing is to really recognize the meaning that we're making of them, because is that meaning then causing you shame around them? And when you have shame around them, is it keeping you from talking to other people about them, expressing them? I think that's a big thing too. Is that when you start to develop intrusive thoughts, really scary ones, like when you are postpartum and you're thinking things like, I'm going to throw my child down the stairs. There's a lot of shame that comes with sharing that with other people, because we assume that other people are going to think that's something that we're going to do. Right. So I think so often too, when we have these like really terrifying intrusive thoughts and we develop shame around them, it's easy to not share them and keep people away from them because we're worried that people might think something negative about us. You come to find out that when you start to share that you have intrusive thoughts with other people, they will say, oh, I've had those thoughts.
Yes. Yes. And I had,
Right.
I mean, really postpartum, right? So when you talk about that hormonal changes, this is why it's so huge postpartum that there is like, they think really 100% of people have some type of intrusive thought postpartum, but around 70% in a 2017 study reported this, that they experienced specifically violent ones against their babies. So in 2017 study, almost half of all new parents experience violent intrusive thoughts towards their babies. And I think when you're a parent, you're so scared to admit that, and other people are going to judge you or think something, or even like the idea of, so when I lived in South Philly, I used to walk the Ben Franklin Bridge. You know, there's like the pedestrian walk
Yeah, I
from,
used to run. I used to do this.
yes.
I used to run because I
Oh,
lived
sorry,
in
not in
Old
South Philly,
City.
In Old City. Yeah. So
Yeah, in
from
Old
Old City
City.
to Camden, right? So remember,
Yeah.
I used to live in Ray
Yes.
Street apartments, and I used to walk back and forth. There was not a time that I did not do that walk that I was like, what if I jumped off? I at no point was suicidal during this. It was more just like, what would happen? I don't
What
know.
would happen?
Would I swim? You know what I mean? Like what kind of breathing ability do I have? Do I secretly
Yeah.
have gills? There was many questions I had in my mind during this walk. Um, but
I
I
hope you
would never want
secretly
to
have
tell
gills.
me too, but I would never want to tell anyone that because I was so scared. It made me look super unstable.
Well, you know what's interesting too is like when you lived in Old City, like we were in grad school
I know. And you're like,
and
when
we
you're
were
in
like
grad school,
learning to be a therapist. And so, like when
you're
you
real
start,
nervous. People are gonna think you're crazy when you're
yes, yeah,
you're
you're
like,
like, oh
they're
my
gonna
God, is
figure me
this
out.
me? Actually,
You're also
most people,
self-diagnosing everything.
yes, most people who are in grad school to become therapists start diagnosing. You just start diagnosing
Immediately.
yourself with everything.
Yeah. And so that
Because
was
you're like,
me,
oh, I
right?
relate to that.
Right. So like, God forbid I like told someone this and then they're like, oh, you're not suitable to be in grad school, or like, I get fucking 302'd.
Right.
Or all the different things that can happen, even though it's a totally normal thought to have this when you're just walking, and it doesn't mean you're gonna do anything or act on it in any way.
You know what? And we have talked about this before on the podcast because our intrusive thoughts are a little different.
Yes.
My intrusive thoughts are like something that I don't have control over happening to me. So like that's like me tripping. Like I have this intrusive thought about me tripping and like smacking my teeth on the ground. That
Yeah.
happens to
Did
me
you
all
see
the
that
time.
after you watched American History X? Like
Maybe
the curb
actually,
stomping scene,
yeah.
I think
Oof.
really stayed in people's brains.
Ah, that's a thing. It's true. When you watch things,
It
when you
does. Oh,
watch,
wait a second. Your trauma is from the directable crazy shit you watch all day long, Jen.
won't stop me.
I saw
No.
American History X, and I have been desperately scared of curb stomping ever since.
Right, right. I mean, but you can't really have intrusive thoughts with like the ghost whisperer, you know? I mean, can you?
Just that I see ghosts.
Right,
Well,
right.
no, now it's like, wow, the dog's barking at something random. There must be a ghost there.
Must be a ghost.
And I'm fine with that because the
What if I
majority of
go?
the ghosts she meets are very nice.
It's like a Casper situation.
It's I no, I think that's simplifying the depth of Ghost Whisperer, in my
I'm so,
opinion. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
A bit of an oversimplification of
Okay.
the emotional.
Excuse me. Casper was there was a lot of depth to Casper. Okay. He lost his parents, didn't he? I don't remember.
Wait, and I was watching an episode of Ghost Whisperer last night, and Rachel Lee Cook was in it from
Oh yeah. She took
Kiss
her glasses off
Me.
and all of a sudden all of a sudden
Beautiful.
it was beautiful.
I'd by the moon in Bali. That's also that song's actually an episode of Abbott Elementary School recently.
Wow. It's like a full it all comes full circle, you know? It's beautiful. Anyway, Ghost Whisperer, what are we talking about? Oh, so my intrusive thoughts are something like happening to me, and yours are like you having control over something.
Yes. Yeah, I do something.
Yeah, not mine. Mine's like a spoon fell into the garbage disposal and I have to go get it. And the intrusive thought is that it's just gonna turn on. Not that I'm gonna
Oh,
turn it on.
that's like some Final Destination shit. Not me. No,
Yeah.
mine's on, and I'm just like, meow,
Oof.
you know,
Final Destination, another early 2000s, not what was that, 90s, late 90s movie that
trauma.
just trauma.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay. So somebody wrote in, what do my intrusive thoughts mean? I feel like I'm a bad person. So we are just going to keep putting this home and home again, which is that intrusive thoughts do not align with who you are. Thoughts are not actions. You can think quote unquote bad thoughts and they do not make you a bad person. Thinking things does not mean that's who you are.
Yeah.
Um, I will have a reactive thought towards someone else and I'm like, oh, I'm such a bitch. Like, no, I didn't do anything to act on that. I had a reactive thought and I called myself out. That's it. That doesn't mean I'm a horrible person. That doesn't mean that I wished ill on someone, right? Doesn't mean that I'm like a bitch. It just means I had an internal reaction that is totally normal and okay. So they don't align with who you are. Don't take them as this says something about me.
And these thoughts just happen, right?
Yeah.
They're called intrusive thoughts for a reason. They're not something that you're creating, you're choosing to create, right? They're spontaneous, they happen automatic, happen very quickly. And so, one of the things we talk about a lot on the show is developing this kind of like internal monologue with yourself. Um, so, I think also noticing like, what do you say to yourself after you have that intrusive thought? Are you saying like, oh, I'm so bad, I'm such a bitch? Like, what are the things that you are saying to yourself about your own thoughts, as opposed to, okay, how do you just get curious about that? Oh, or I recognize that I just had an intrusive thought, right? To be neutral about it, to say, oh, that was interesting, right? Like, so when I have an intrusive thought, that's how I try to respond to myself when I have that intrusive thought. Like, oh, that's interesting. Like, oh, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think really recognizing, like, what is the way that you talk to yourself about your intrusive thoughts? How are you maybe blaming yourself, shaming yourself for them? Because that's where it can spiral into it, wearing on your self-esteem, wearing on your sense of self. Like it can really turn into something heavier than it has to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes intrusive thoughts just happen when you're human. And so noticing the way in which you talk to yourself about those intrusive thoughts is going to be really important here.
So it was one of those things. So don't ignore, but acknowledge and move through,
Mm-hmm.
right? Acknowledge them and move through them. We also love to talk about the idea of practicing opposite action, right? So for me, I had this fear of walking up and down the stairs with the baby. So I didn't let myself go up and down the stairs. That's not super helpful when you need something from upstairs and your husband's not coming home for 8 hours. And so what took me a while to get there, but what I'd have to do is make myself walk up and down the stairs and show that like, oh, nothing happened. I didn't throw her over. Everything was going to be okay. So practicing opposite action of what your anxiety is telling you to do with that.
You know what that also does when you're practicing opposite action, you're also developing a level of trust in
Yep.
yourself. And sometimes when we have intrusive thoughts, it can easily wear on our ability to trust ourselves. if we're having this thought of, oh, I'm going to throw her down the stairs, oh, then I can't trust myself because I'm having this intrusive thought. You can still trust yourself when you're having intrusive thoughts. Just because you're having the thought doesn't mean you're going to act on it. And so when you're doing that opposite action, you're helping to prove to yourself that just because you have an intrusive thought does not mean you're going to act on it. When you're avoiding it, right? When you're like, I'm not going to do this because I'm having this intrusive thought, you're almost telling yourself, oh, this means that I can't trust myself and that I am going to throw her down the stairs.
Yeah.
So that's why opposite action, although scary, and let's just, validate that, understandably scary when you're having these thoughts. Reason why opposite action can be really helpful is because you are slowly developing this trust within yourself. And something you can do is you can take it one step at a time, literally and figuratively.
Oh, whoa.
You can walk up a few stairs, walk back down, walk up a few more stairs, walk back down. Right. And so, when you're learning to prove to yourself that like you can do this, if these are new intrusive thoughts, you can take it one step at a time. You can start even slower than that. You can start visualizing, okay, well, what if I walk up a few stairs and walk back down? Like almost just give yourself permission to start visualizing yourself walking up and down the stairs, and then take one step and then take two steps. And then like you can get yourself back to doing it. But when you avoid it, then you are proving to yourself or saying to yourself, oh, I'm not able to do this.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can do that with yourself. Sometimes you need help. If the intrusive thoughts are really strong, if they've been going on for a really long time, sometimes you do need mental health support to be able to do that.
Or a nice SSRI.
A nice SSRI.
Sometimes you need, that's okay, baby. It's okay to take a pill.
Stabilizer. Talk
Nice
to a
little stabilizer.
psychiatrist.
Yes, right? Like, I mean, and that's the thing is, and that's when we really go to how much is this impacting your daily life?
Mm.
That's what you have to ask yourself. So, yes, we're sitting here, we're talking about this. Like, there is a massive normalization we want to do with this. And also, though, if it's more than that for you, if this is not just like, oh, this come into my brain sometimes, if it is impacting you from doing things, from going out, from doing stuff, you need to call someone, right? That is another level.
Yeah. What other questions we got? Someone said how to bring them up with your therapist.
Oh, it's a great question.
It's such a good question. And my first thought is, my guess is why you're asking this is because there's a fear that your therapist is going to think something negatively about you. Maybe 302 you if you're saying, I'm having this intrusive thought about jumping off the bridge. You can say to your therapist, this is just an intrusive thought.
Yeah.
I want to talk through this intrusive thought that's happening.
Yeah.
If it's jumping off the bridge, you can say, I do not want to kill myself. I just want to make this very clear. I don't want to kill myself. This is just an intrusive thought.
For some reason, I just think about this when I walk over the bridge. That's it.
There is a difference between being suicidal and having an intrusive thought. And so you straight up say, label it. This is an intrusive thought I want to talk about. I've been nervous to talk to you about this because I'm worried about what you're going to think about me. Likely your therapist is going to say, everyone has intrusive thoughts. I have intrusive thoughts as a therapist, right? This is part of it. But the reason why it's important to bring it up to your therapist is because your therapist can help you figure out if it really is impacting your daily life, how they can help support you in that. So bringing it up to your therapist is actually, if you already have a therapist, like also really important. If it feels really distressing to you, it's happening often.
Yeah.
Absolutely bring it up to your therapist.
Why do we repeat them over and over again, our thoughts? Usually when we're doing any type of overthinking, we're trying to make sense of something. We're trying to figure it out. We think if I keep thinking about why I'm thinking about jumping off the bridge, then I'll make some solution here. It's just simply not true. Overthinking doesn't lead to solutions. It typically just makes us head into some type of other spiral in our brains, and it keeps us from not feeling and being present in this world. So sometimes it can also be a self-protective mechanism, right? How to not actually go anything. If I just keep thinking about something, if I live here in my brain, then I don't ever have to actually make a decision. Like me trying to decorate my house.
That's fun. Take some time.
It's like me trying to pick out wallpaper. If I just keep thinking and looking at different options, then I wouldn't have to make the decision and then be mad at myself if I make the wrong decision, right? So
Mm,
like it living in sometimes the planning mode or the thinking mode often sometimes is self-protective than just the fear. We hear about this all the time, people trying to figure out if they want to have kids. Sometimes if I sit there and I keep going through the pros and cons of having children, it's because I'm really scared for what happens next. And so if I just live in the pros and cons world, I don't have to reach the next fear step.
yeah. And I think it so easily, once again, sends you into a shame spiral of like, what does this mean about me? Right. Like, if I'm thinking about this, what does this mean about me? And this is where we go back to the idea of this is just something that happens and it doesn't have a meaning. It doesn't have to have a
Yeah.
meaning. And to approach things by just being neutral about your own thoughts. Oh, this has happened. That was weird. Right. That was distressing. Whoa, it'll keep you from actually just going right into that shame spiral that this must mean something about
Yeah.
you, because that is not necessarily true.
Yeah.
A dealer's choice.
Um, how to stop ruminating without suppressing. So that's a really interesting one, right? So that's when we talk about, okay, so what does your rumination look like? And then what does your suppressing look like? So if you go with this idea of how to stop ruminating without suppressing, how much time and energy and space am I giving to the ruminating? What am I thinking I'm getting out of the ruminating versus what am I getting from the suppressing? Sometimes the suppressing doesn't actually help us to get to anything. It just keeps popping up later, right? If we just bury it down, it's going to eventually come on up again. So, how do I really acknowledge it and move through it without shoving down, right? So, acknowledging might be, holy shit, that was a really scary thought that I was gonna throw my kid on the concrete, right? Why did I have that? I guess that's my fear. I'll drop it. I'm my fear that my child's gonna get hurt. I'm aware that this like little thing depends on me for life, and that's actually way too much responsibility than anyone really wants. Um, and there's no furtherance, there's nothing I did to create this. I am not, throwing the baby, nothing is happening here, but I guess my anxiety is high. If my anxiety is high, what are some ways I can do to calm it? That's it. It's giving me information. What would I like to do with that information?
Another thing you can also do is like dig into what's underneath a lot of this anxiety, just like you said, Em, right? The feeling of like all of a sudden I have all of this responsibility to like keep a human being alive.
Yeah.
What is that like for me in general, right? Just like to really get underneath what the anxiety is and see if you can get into it a little bit. Sometimes we stay on the top level of anxiety to keep
Mm-hmm.
us away from like the really heavy emotions that are underneath it. And in this example, some of those emotions might be like, whoa, this was a huge life change. I all of a sudden have this responsibility that I did not have before. And that is really terrifying for me. What is that
Yeah.
like for me to have this shift, in all areas? Because that fear, that big life transition can come out in these like ruminating ways, like I'm gonna drop the baby, what's gonna happen? And so see if you can get underneath it a little bit to acknowledge and validate some of those deeper emotions that are coming up for you, whether it's being a new mom or whether there's another life transition. Maybe there's something else going on in your life and it's coming out through this intense anxiety, and see if you can acknowledge it, because sometimes when we try to push those feelings down, whatever those feelings are, that's where it comes out as anxiety, and we try to repress the anxiety. um, and that's just going to keep popping up. So really what you want to do is acknowledge too, like the deeper emotion underneath that.
Um, uh, and I think the other thing that can happen, and we see this a lot, that for folks that do like OCD therapy, like something that OCD therapists do is they do not reassure, right? So if I say to you, I'm really scared that I'm going to throw the baby, and you keep saying, you're not going to throw the baby, you're not going to throw the baby, that doesn't actually help anything. It might reduce my distress for the moment and make me feel better. Long term, it doesn't give me the skills myself to do anything. And so just reassuring yourself you're not going to do that isn't really helpful, as opposed to, whoa, I'm having a lot of fucking intrusive thoughts around this. Something big is going on. What am I going to do to take care of myself? It
Especially
makes you,
with
I
it.
really wonder how undiagnosed OCD is.
Yeah.
I wish we had
hard.
stats on that.
Yeah, there's
Which,
right. Me too. We can do another episode. We'll
yes,
do another episode really diving into that. But another thing, if you know, with if you're a therapist working with OCD, part of like kind of the reassurance is then the therapist reassurance can become part of the compulsion.
yes,
Right. Okay. If I get this reassurance from my therapist, then it means that I'm not going to end up throwing them the baby down the stairs.
yes. And
Right.
then you
So,
need it from the therapist. So then what happens when the therapist has to cancel? What
right.
happens when the therapist is sick, right?
Just
It be
becomes part of the compulsion.
exactly.
And I just want to validate for people who struggle with OCD, the obsession is so strong. Like it's so strong that compulsion makes it stronger. Um, but I just want to acknowledge like that is really scary and can be really, really scary. Um, but it's not your fault that you have these like very intrusive thoughts. It's part of your OCD if you're someone who is struggling with OCD. And that is where medication and therapy can be extremely, extremely helpful.
Um, uh, one more, and then we have to get to DRM and Jen.
There's so many. And I'm like, are these intrusive? I'm like, are these intrusive thoughts? I'm not sure. But maybe it doesn't matter.
Somebody, this is an interesting one. I just want to know what you make of this. How to tell the difference between intrusive thoughts and truthful thoughts.
I think it's kind of the same question of like, am I going to do this?
Oh, okay. That's the person's fear.
That's, I think it's like, is this a truthful thought of like, am I going to do this?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Is this just an intrusive thought or is this something I'm actually going to do? I think this
Yeah.
person is maybe asking, like, can I trust myself?
Well, it's interesting. It goes back to like the cognitive distortion that you read a lot about for CBT of like fortune telling. Like you
Yeah.
actually are not a psychic unless
Right.
maybe you're a ghost whisperer.
Like Jennifer Love
Like
Hewitt.
Jennifer Love Hewitt, right? But like for like the most of us, we're not actually psychics. We can't actually predict any type of future. And so you having a thought doesn't actually mean that you're seeing like some foretelling,
Mm.
foretelling. Is that the right word? Doesn't seem like it.
Future telling, foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. Yes. Wow. There's some English teacher listening to this, like these girls.
But you know what? I think all the movies and we've seen makes us feel like, oh, I had this thought. Let me tell you,
Yeah.
it's Final Destination. It's literally Final Destination. Like he has this thought on the plane.
Yes. It's all coming
Like
together.
it's all coming together. It's actually Final Destination. Did you see? I might have mentioned this already on the podcast, but and you probably didn't see this, but there's like a reel
I didn't see
where
it.
I
Say
know
no
that's
more. I
I
didn't
know.
see it.
There's a like a truck with all like the trees
Oh
on
God,
the
yeah.
back of it, and you just see cars like getting away
No,
from it, and in the thing it's like all these people saw Final Destination too.
but it's true.
It's true. I would
I
be
would
out of
not
there.
drive behind that
No
ever.
chance.
No, no. All right, dear Emma Jen, will you read for me
Okay,
today, darling?
of course I will. Dear Em and Jen, hi ladies. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on a future podcast about grief, particularly about grieving a person you're not allowed to grieve. For me, my father passed away less than 3 months ago. Long story, somewhat short. He wasn't a great father or husband. He struggled with addiction to alcohol and gambling and got into drugs at some point. He grew up bouncing from place to place, even had to live with family and friends of my dad's. We were homeless, living in a car by the river at one point. The budget in was a frequent home. Towards the end of my parents' marriage, I was 14.
My two older brothers.
My two older brothers, wow, had moved out years prior. My dad became violent towards my mom. Even after she took me and left my dad and found out where we were staying, and he would watch the house. He broke in at one point when he knew my mom was alone. He frequently stole things from the house or money from my mom's purse to pawn them while we went without food, water, or electricity. Like I said, not great. I know he loved us in his way and he regretted a lot of his decisions and actions. I talked more to him and saw him more in the last year of his life than I did the whole 10 years prior. He did apologize for what it's worth. Now that he's gone, I struggle with how I'm supposed to feel. My mom is understandably still angry. If he comes up in conversations, it's like an automatic discussion on what a terrible person he was. I try not to mention him around her, even around others, close friends, family, my husband. Nobody seems to take his passing as a significant thing that has happened. I'm not sure how to navigate my grief, sadness, anger, loss of hope at a meaningful relationship, etc., when I can't talk about it to anyone because he was never really a dad anyway. Thoughts?
Mm.
Oof.
I think it is so incredible this person is able to see the nuance in this situation here.
Yeah.
This is what we talk about when we talk about complex grief. Grief becomes complex usually when we had some type of complex relationship with a person, right? That I can sit here and say, man, my dad was an addict and he was fucking flawed. And in some ways, his death makes it easier for certain people, right? Like maybe some people felt relief in his passing, but that isn't what it is for me, right? That like there was also part of me, this is also your father. I don't care how bad they were, how shitty they were. If you had love for this person, you had love for them. You don't have to you don't have to have justify that for any
Yeah.
reason why. I'm so sorry going through that. And also the other thing it sounds like you're really feeling is also disenfranchised grief. So grief that you can't talk about, that isn't accepted, because that's what's happening, right? Like there isn't actually you're not getting care and love for the grief you're feeling because everyone else has so many big feelings around it. And that's not necessarily their fault either. Everyone's allowed to have their own experience, but that disenfranchised grief, feeling like you can't talk about it, will make the grieving process more difficult as well.
Yeah. One thing that came up, that I was thinking about is part of the grief too is this like loss of hope that she mentioned. Um, because even though your dad wasn't able to give you what you needed, to say the least, in your childhood, and there was a lot that happened because of the way that he was acting, it sounds like him being alive still also left a little bit of hope to have somewhat of a repair in your relationship, or like what could this look like in the future if he gets sober, if he cleans himself up, what could this look like? And you're not just grieving his loss, but you're also grieving the loss of a possible future. Whether or not that was going to happen, we don't know, but it can be helpful in coping with like what your relationship is now, to be able to picture that possibility of a future with him. And so it makes a lot of sense as you're talking about this, how you're also having such complex grief around like losing the hope of like what things could look like in the future. And I just wonder if maybe that thought about, could this change? What could our relationship look like? Is maybe something that has helped you cope with whatever current state of the relationship you had with them. And so it could also be taking away your coping mechanism. I no longer can picture what this could look like in the future if he cleans himself up. And because you also had more contact in the last year than you have the past 10 years, was that feeding into the possibility of your relationship changing? So there's, it is very complex and there's a
Yeah.
lot that's going on. And I also have to say, you're allowed to grieve in your own way. Just because your mom is having a different experience, maybe your two older brothers are
Yeah.
having a different experience, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to have the exact feelings that you're having. And so
But it
it
might
might mean,
mean, oh my God. Well, I don't know. So sorry to interrupt. We were maybe going to say
that's
the
okay.
exact same
Maybe
thing.
I was going to say it might mean you have to go to different people. You have to talk about, is that what you're going to say?
Go to a grief group. You
Go
can't
to a
talk to your,
grief
then you
group.
can't talk to your family about it. And that's
Yeah.
okay. Sometimes it's not it.
And maybe you were able to talk to your family about your relationship with your dad, before he died. And maybe that has shifted in his death. And so that is maybe another thing you're grieving, is like your ability to talk about your dad and your relationship with your dad with your family members. And so that can also be a transition. Um, but I think the thing that I want to drive home is like you're allowed to grieve and feel however you're feeling. There is no right or wrong. You are allowed to have these emotions. It's just a matter of how you take care of yourself in them.
And we're sending you love.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Shrink Chicks.
We'll see you back here next week for another session.
In the meantime, if you want a question answered or a topic discussed, follow us on Instagram at ShrinkChicks. And if you're looking to get connected with a therapist like us to start or continue your therapeutic journey, visit thetherapygroup.com. Just fill out a contact form on our website, and we will personally match you with one of our amazing therapists. And for all of our therapists and group practice owners out there, we also offer group practice consulting.
And if you're looking to support yourself further and support our show, check out our amazing merch options at shrinkchicks.com/merch and our Know Yourself, Grow Yourself journal on Amazon. Also, if you'd be so kind, we'd love a rating, review, and for you to share with a friend or an enemy or a mother-in-law, honestly, whoever needs it, so that we can keep reaching more people on our mission to bring mental health topics to your ears every week.
Thanks for being here with us. And don't forget, to grow yourself, you got to know yourself.